Star Wars, a franchise that has stood for decades now, starting all the way back in 1977, with one film that was released under the impression it would be a box office bomb, turned into a worldwide phenomenon. It kept going too, with the release of the next chapter in 1980, The Empire Strikes Back, an excellent sequel that people understandably hold in high regard. Then, in 1983, the trilogy would be capped off with Return of the Jedi. Not as strong as Empire, but still a very solid finale. But, for 16 years, the franchise lay dormant. A lot of talk was made about sequels and prequels, but since those wouldn't be coming for years, fans were just left to wonder, where do I get my Star Wars fix? Well, that's where the expanded universe came into play. Numerous stories that were told within the Star Wars universe that had brilliant world building. Comic books, novels, and the topic of this video, games, were released to flesh out the world we saw in the films. But the Star Wars universe wouldn't get truly amazing until we reached the prequel era. Starting in 1999, with the release of The Phantom Menace, the world of Star Wars was massively expanded on. There's a lot of world building and newly added mythology within the film that has impacted the franchise even to this day. And that continued with the next two prequels, which gave us a look into the Clone Wars. This would lead to more expanded universe content, including the 2D micro-series and new comics and new games. It makes sense this is where the EU was at its best, because the 2010s is where it was at its worst. Because it was bad? No, it's because it died. In 2012, the notorious Disney acquisition occurred, which meant the mouse acquired the entire Lucasfilm company. But come on, it's Disney we're talking about. They're pure of heart, right? They wouldn't acquire this titan of a franchise and proceed to piss everybody off, right? Well, you know the answer. Yes, one of the most infamous decisions made by the company was to officially declare any expanded universe material released prior to 2012 as Legends, aka non-canon. Not to mention, the reason they chose to do this was to give filmmakers freedom with their work so they don't need to have knowledge of countless novels and games with tons of, admittedly, convoluted lore. That's fine and dandy, I suppose. Except for the fact that the Disney trilogy rehashed everything from the previous films, and a lot of their new shows and games are attempting to recanonize Legends material. So much for creative freedom, huh? At this point, what the hell was the point in decanonizing the EU? These days, Star Wars is just devoid of substance. With the sequel trilogy wrapped up, the franchise has been relegated to Disney Plus shows and a couple of games every now and then. The novels, if new ones even get written, don't get that much buzz whatsoever. It really does amaze me that Disney bought the rights to a franchise that people would stand in lines just to see.
I used to drive by and look at the lines and think, what?
To now a franchise that is practically on life support. And I always thought that people were being overly pessimistic for thinking the franchise is dead or worthless. But over time, I now see their point. Nothing about it excites me anymore, and the things that do excite me are like 2 projects. It really sucks, because while I'm still a fan of this franchise, I am more so a fan of what Star Wars used to be, aka good. Now, I've said a lot of opinionated things thus far, so before I get asked about it, here's my ranking.
I mean, it's alright, it's alright, that's why he's the GOAT! The GOAT! Woo!
It was perfect. Perfect.
I mean, it's alright,
It's the biggest piece of dog shit. It's the biggest piece of dog shit.
I mean, it's alright,
Now that we got that out of the way, let me get back on track. So I made it clear that modern Star Wars pales in comparison to what came before. But one thing I know will always have my back is the golden era of Star Wars games. The 2000s, like the EU in general, is where some of the greatest Star Wars games were released. You see, my childhood, in terms of video games, was filled with your typical Mickey's Magical Mirrors and Larry Boy and the Bad Apples, but a few of these Star Wars games I spent a lot of time playing as well. If anything, these games made me love the franchise more than the movies did. So, why don't I stop this introduction already, and go back to a time when Star Wars was a fun thing to enjoy and nothing existed to divide the fanbase. To start this retrospective, let's first take a look at Now this is something that can put me in a good mood. LEGO Star Wars The Complete Saga is an interesting case because this is a compilation of sorts of two separate games that released prior. 2005 and 2006 were the release years of LEGO Star Wars 1 and 2 respectively, and in 2007, The Complete Saga would combine and remaster both games. Regardless if it's The Complete Saga or the individual games, I grew up playing these a ton, as with many other LEGO games I owned. Now this is not the first time I've talked about the LEGO games on this channel. A while back, I talked about Indiana Jones games. Shameless plug, go watch it, thanks. And there, I explained much of why I and many others like these games so much. The humor, simple pick up and play style, two-player co-op which allows you to play with a friend or a sibling, and all the collectibles that completionists swoon over. Instead, this time around, I want to focus on some of my personal favorite levels from this game, and talk a bit about the community and how they have introduced an insane modding scene. So, let's start with levels from Episode 1. Negotiations I still think is a solid tutorial level. The pod race, while a little repetitive, is still better than the original incarnation of it. Obviously, Darth Maul gets huge bonus points for being based on the only worthwhile moment in Phantom Menace with the glorious Duel of the Fates song. Episode 2 has some standouts like Discovery on Kamino, since I always like the background music. Droid Factory is solid too, but Jedi Battle easily takes the cake here. The best moment from Episode 2 was adapted quite faithfully here. Episode 3 got the short end of the stick here, since they developed these levels with an incomplete version of the film. Because of that, the only good levels I'd say here are Chancellor in Peril, and of course, Darth Vader, which is incredible for the simple fact that you and Player 2 get to fight each other at the end. For the original trilogy, Episode 4 has a nice beginning level with secret plans. Then I'd say my only other favorites are the ones during the Death Star scenes, like the Battle of Yavin. The standouts in Episode 5 are the Cloud City levels. For levels based on one of the best films in the franchise, I felt these adaptations were not as fun. Episode 6 was mostly solid all around, except for the Endor levels. Those kinda bored me. But let's not forget the bonus levels, which are essentially table scraps. You get to play the original versions of the Pod Race and Gunship Cavalry and the secret Episode 4 level from the 2005 game, plus the LEGO City Million Stud level, including a new version appropriately named Newtown. Anakin's Flight is also a new level, which is half true since this was supposed to be in the original 2005 game, but was scrapped late into development. Now that I've discussed my favorite levels, let me now get into the beautiful modding scene this game has brought. Talented individuals like Barrio the Weird and Laterni Gamer have completely changed this game. New characters, new vehicles, new levels, which is the coolest thing ever. Seriously, go check out their work. It's some incredible stuff that I'm happy to see in a game that I hold very dear to me. Overall, I still love this game, and will continue to love it forever. With newer iterations of LEGO Star Wars coming along, many would say they blew this game out of the water. In terms of graphics, in terms of gameplay, LEGO Star Wars 3 is a decent game, but compared to the Complete Saga, I don't prefer it. Then there is the Skywalker Saga, which frustrates me. I wanted it to be a replacement for the Complete Saga, but in the end, it left me bored, uninterested, and disappointed. Ultimately, the Complete Saga will remain my favorite LEGO game of all time, only rivaled by LEGO City Undercover. Up next, we have a duology of games made by Pandemic Studios. Anyways, they are the masterminds behind these magnificent titles, yet they also made the first two Destroy All Humans games, so they do have two great duologies under their belt. The Battlefront series is held in high regard in terms of Star Wars games, and understandably so, but honestly, they're just great games in general. Battlefront 1, for me, is the lesser of the two, but I still have a fun time playing it. The maps you fight on, I'd argue, are a bit better than the second game's maps. You can fight at Tatooine, featuring the Sarlacc pit, which can snatch you up. Cloud City is another cool one where they even included the Carbonite freezing chamber, but in terms of gameplay, it's just a lot slower. You can't sprint, making it a nightmare to traverse some of these maps. The campaign, while decent, is just playing on all the maps and you're tasked with either capturing all the command posts or killing all the reinforcements on the opposing team. Galactic Conquest is here, and it is a cool mode since it's almost like a board game. You move your capital ship to various planets, and if you run into the enemy, you battle to see who controls the planet you're on. While it is cool, I'd rather just do instant action if I want to play random matches. So, that's Battlefront 1. I can have some fun with it, but if I want to have some serious fun, I just start up Battlefront 2. No, get that out of here. There we go, Battlefront 2. This game right here is incredible. Much like the first game, you play through various battles from the movies or create your own in instant action. You can play through two eras, whether it be the Republic versus Sis or the Empire versus Rebel Alliance. Each team has largely the same classes like the rocket launchers, snipers, and engineers. Honestly, just consider this game vastly superior to TF2 at this point. I mean, however, racking up tons of kills nets you some unlockable classes, like the Jet Trooper for the Republic, the Dark Trooper for the Empire, and the Droideka for the Sis. But the most important class you get is either a hero or a villain. Depending on the settings for the match, you can control a classic character in both eras. They differ depending on the map, but the Republic, for example, has Obi-Wan, Mace Windu, and Yoda. Each of these heroes and villains are tanks, and they are the best thing that can happen for your team. Plus, you can finally sprint! See, this is exactly why this is better than Battlefront 1. I mean, overall, this is a massive improvement over the first, and I love it. But this is only the tip of the iceberg, because I'm now going to discuss the brilliant campaign featured in this game, Rise of the Empire. The story is told through the perspective of a retired 501st Trooper who fought during the Battle of Geonosis, all the way to the Battle of Hoth. Each beginning and end cutscenes are narrated wonderfully by Tamora Morrison, which is interesting because he voiced the clones in the first game, but this time around he only narrates the campaign and a different actor portrays the clones. Regardless, I love his voice work. You can tell the clone Tamora voices has been through some serious shit and it carries so much weight. Now in terms of content within the campaign, it seemingly looks like standard battles. While yes, they are your usual battles, most of them are not. When you start playing as the Empire, you first have to go to Naboo and take out the Queen, then you're told to go to Mustafar to take down a separatist droid army, and even the Clone Army, which is my personal favorite level. It's classified as the Camino Uprising, and it hits so hard considering you are playing as an Imperial clone, and Boba Fett, who is also a clone. The original cutscene for this level that they scrapped conveyed the weight of this mission a lot more too.
The first few kills were the hardest. After all, it's hard not to get a little spooked when the enemy screams with your voice. But we shook it off and did our job.
The main reason these levels are unique is because you cannot pit the droids against the Empire, and the same goes for the clones in the Empire. Remember how I said the first game's campaign had no real objective aside from capturing command posts? Well, Battlefront 2 fixes that by giving us unique objectives. Whether it be destroying a specific number of things or obtaining a crystal that's eventually used for the Death Star. Yeah, old canon stuff. Speaking of old canon, another aspect of the campaign that is downright chilling is that the clones knew the entire time about Order 66.
Suddenly, we realized that the Jedi could be fooled. And if they could be fooled, they could be killed. We all knew what was about to happen, what we're about to do. Did we have any doubts? Any private, traitorous thoughts? Perhaps, but no one said a word.
No inhibitor chips or anything. These clones from the original canon knew what would eventually happen and complied with it. Hey guys, this is me in post-production because I forgot to go over the space combat in the game. And for me, it makes sense because in my opinion, it's a little forgettable. So the main objective in the battles is to shoot down the opposing team's ships and to infiltrate the enemy ship and destroy their shields. And while that sounds fun on paper, I always just found them to be a bit dull. If you want to play a Star Wars game that has great aerial combat, I'd say just try Rogue Squadron. You know, if they ever re-released it. In the end, the Battlefront series is one of the greatest in the action and FPS shooter genre. I'll never not have a fun time playing random battles, including that heroes versus villain mode, and will overall keep enjoying this duology while not acknowledging the fact that another company tainted its series name. Up next, which is our third, or technically fourth game, is Republic Commando. So you might be thinking, oh great, more Star Wars FPS games? While yes, you are correct, I wouldn't write this one off so quickly. Republic Commando is practically the only one of its kind in terms of Star Wars games, as this game is solely played in first person. Battlefront lets you play in first-person perspective, but the amount of people who play Battlefront in first-person are the same amount of people that play Minecraft in third-person. Anyways, enough about the perspective you play in. Let's get into the meat of this game and show why it's really awesome. The game begins with a fetus. Not even joking. Yeah, I wasn't kidding about the entire game being seen through the eyes of a clone trooper, because we get to see him in his fetal stage all the way to him training for the Republic Army. We then find out why the title is the way that it is, because this is no ordinary clone. This is a clone commando, an elite type of clone that is a brute. Finally, the clone puts on his helmet, and we jump forward in time to the Battle of Geonosis, aka Level 1. To start, I must immediately bring up how grounded this game is. Hardly any Jedi appear, and when they do, it's usually over a holo projector. They're never really on the battlefield in-game, which means it's clone V-Droid for most, if not all, of the game. Because of that, you really feel like you're controlling a soldier in a war. After all, the franchise is called Star Wars, so the fact this game makes you feel like you're fighting a war is a great touch to detail. Again, the perspective helps with the realism too. Not to mention, this game has some brutal visuals. Mainly, if you kill a droid or Geonosian up close, their oil or blood splatters on your visor. So, as you control the main character Boss, who is voiced by live-action clone actor Tamora Morrison again, you end up finding all your squad mates. We have Scorch, Fixer, and Sev. Oh boy, Sev. That's another thing I adore about this game, the banter between Delta Squad. Boss is the by-the-books clone, he isn't super jokey, and he seems very straight-faced. The other three, though, they are a joy to see interact with each other. Sev in particular is one of my favorite clones and possibly just favorite things in existence right now. Part of the reason I like the characters and their personalities so much is because of him. The voice actor, Jonathan Cook, did a brilliant job giving Sev the kind of attitude he has.
My trigger finger is getting itchy. When do I get to kill something again? Come out, so I can kill you all. Kill the enemy, sir. Not yourself. Keep them coming. They're just lining up to die. Well, this wouldn't take so long if you could aim. They're just more meat for the grinder. Try aiming instead of talking.
Okay, so getting back to the gameplay side of things, a big aspect of this game is teamwork. You are the boss, after all, so naturally you must give your comrades orders. So of course, each clone has a different ability on your team. Scorch blows shit up, Fixer can hack, and Sev, he can snipe. Wonderfully. In certain situations, you need to pick and choose where you want them to provide cover fire or when you want Scorch or Fixer to use their unique ability. There are hints of strategy within this game, and while I may not succeed at such a thing, I can usually conclude what the right call should be. Now jumping forward into the game, let's talk about how it ends. During the Battle of Kashyyyk, Delta Squad manages to destroy a big old separatist battleship, which causes them and the Trandoshan's to get out of town. The day appears to be saved, but Sev comes in over the transmission, and his situation is not looking good. The whole squad wants to rescue him, but they're ordered back to the Republic fleet, Sev's fate being left ambiguous. But since no sequel was made and none of the books explained what happened to him, he's just currently stuck in limbo, neither confirmed to be alive or dead. In the old canon, anyway. So, that's Republic Commando. It is an overall blast to play, and the characters really keep you engaged with experiencing it all the way through. One complaint I guess I could throw out is that sometimes there are quite big difficulty spikes, and I wasn't even playing on hard. But aside from that, I recommend this heavily to any Star Wars fan who hasn't played it yet. So, here we are. 4 games in should mark the end of this, just like in my last Lucasfilm-centered video. So, thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next... Wait, what does that sound? It sounds like music, but where is it? Whoa, holy sh... Okay, ignoring the fact that this game busted in unannounced, Force Unleashed will be the final game covered in this video. You're lucky I like you because I would have thrown you out by this point. This one is an anomaly because the version I'll be talking about is on the PC. However, the one I grew up playing is actually the Wii version, which is drastically different. The overall story is the same, but the gameplay, level design, bosses, and voice lines, even though it's like the same script, either differ slightly or heavily from the flagship version. So to keep things simple, I'll just be talking about the version that's currently on Steam. So, let's get started. The game begins on Kashyyyk. Ironic since Republic Commando ended on Kashyyyk. We take control of Darth Vader, which is a nice change of pace since the last few games we control normal troopers, but now we're essentially a walking tank. We make our way through the Wookiees until we fight against a Jedi in exile. After we kill him, we kidnap his child and we train him to become this fan-favorite character known as Starkiller. Yes, if there's one thing that will remain iconic about this game, is the fact that it introduced Galen Merrick, aka Starkiller, to the franchise. But personally, I like to call him Kratos, because that is practically who he is. That's a good segue to talk about the gameplay, because it plays quite a lot like the old God of War games. Hack and slash is the genre those games fall into, and the same applies to The Force Unleashed. Various combos you can pull off to demolish your enemies, whether it be with the Force or your lightsaber, make you feel like a god of war. Yes, the game is called The Force Unleashed for a reason, and Galen sure does justify the title. This guy can zap enemies to death with force lightning, or you can just chuck him far off the map. Later in the game though, he legit pulls a Star Destroyer out of the sky. At this point, the two reasons Starkiller isn't canon anymore is he's from Legends and this scene right here. But that is getting into story territory, which I may as well finish up. So the reason Vader trained Starkiller was so that he could hunt down and destroy the remaining Jedi hiding throughout the galaxy. Which is kind of funny, because that essentially makes him a prototype Inquisitor. Anyways, the first Jedi that we take down is Rom Koda, which we blind and then throw out the window. Next, we take down this guy who built a Jedi temple out of garbage. And finally, we take down a Jedi High Council member, that being Shakti. And yes, before you ask, this is her 100th death. Once we return though, Vader betrays Galen, but later on just goes, "Sorry, my finger slipped, I didn't mean it." He then assigns us a mission to start a rebellion against the Empire. But spoiler, it was all a trick again, because I guess Galen just never learns.
You agreed to stay away! I lied.
So now, Galen must rescue all the captured senators aboard the Death Star. Before we can reach the throne room, Vader wants to duel. We then proceed to wipe the floor with him, which really shows the difference between a game like this and something like Fallen Order. That game has a Vader sequence, but it's not even a boss fight, there's no health bar. Instead, you're just running for your life. Force Unleashed went, "Oh, Vader wants to fight? That's cute." Anyways, we have Vader on his knees, about to die, but we do have a split decision to make. Do we kill Vader for everything he's done? Or do we attack Palpatine since he's about to kill the prisoners? The true ending is us fighting Palpatine, which ends in Galen sacrificing his life for everyone. His family crest is chosen as their logo, and the rebellion is officially formed. In this continuity, at least. But the real standout ending is when we choose to kill Vader. Palpatine kills the prisoners, and he throws a damn ship at us. But Galen somehow survived and is now in his own Vader-esque suit. He then becomes Palpatine's new apprentice, whether he likes it or not. That's not where the Dark Timeline ends though, because this game has additional bonus levels that show us Starkiller taking Vader's place through A New Hope and Empire Strikes Back. These levels are awesome, but edgy at the same time. In the first level, Starkiller must track down the stolen Death Star plans and runs into trouble with Jabba as he faces the Rancor and Boba Fett. He subdues them both and then heads to Mos Eisley to take back the plans. But uh-oh, we now must fight Kenobi. We toss him into the Falcon's engine, but he immediately returns as a ghost? The greatest part about it is that you can only hurt him with Force Lightning, which makes some sense, but still, it's a little odd. Regardless, we defeat the ghost, but the Falcon gets away, which concludes the first alternate timeline level. The second and last one has us fighting through the Battle of Hoth, where we eventually encounter Luke Skywalker. Like usual, we overpower him, but he suddenly starts using dark side abilities. We make quick work of that by throwing him into an oncoming snow speeder, and then we chop off his hand. Luke losing his right hand must be like a canon event. after some baiting by Starkiller, Luke officially turns to the dark side, and that's where the alternate timeline ambiguously ends. Overall, The Force Unleashed is still a fun as hell game. You feel like an unstoppable force through the entire experience. Not to mention, leveling up your attacks is like the cherry on top, because that's when you practically become a god. The character of Galen Merrick is also cool, but if I'm being honest, bringing him back into modern canon is not as good as an idea as people make it out to be. Honestly, the fact that he was canon at one point in time is weird enough, but hey, the fact he is so overpowered makes a great time for playing this game. The Wii version still might be my preferred one, but that one didn't have the DLC levels, so this version gets some brownie points. Anyways, get out of here now. Thank you. Well, there you have it. Few of the Star Wars games from the 2000s that I think are still great to this day. But of course, I have not even scratched the surface of 2000 Star Wars games, since there are plenty more that I could have featured in this video. Jedi Academy, Rogue Squadron, Knights of the Old Republic, the magnum opus, even some that are from the 90s like Super Star Wars. Also, while the 2000s may have been the best for Star Wars games, that doesn't mean the present day isn't devoid of good games. While not perfect, the Jedi series by Respawn and EA are very solid titles, and Star Wars Eclipse intrigues me a lot. Unfortunately, it'll take like 10 years before we can play it. See, people think Eclipse has been cancelled, and while it hasn't been confirmed that it is, I'm not surprised people think that way, considering many Star Wars titles that had great potential have been scrapped. 1313, Battlefront 3, First Assault, that Darth Maul game. So many titles I would have loved to have played, never released to the masses. Oh well, at least I'll still have these great titles from the 2000s. With all that being said, thank you all for watching this video. I'll catch you all in the next video I decide to write a script for. Take care.